Nate, we are back and we are looking at our updated top 20 under 25, looking at the post draft rankings of some of our top 20 players we want to build around.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting list we got working with here. And if you enjoy this video, please leave a like, comment down below what wide receiver did not make this list that should have. I have a quick guess for who that might be.
Oh man.
Not my fault. We'll get into it. And if you want to talk with us that much more and no players to build around, check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that free Discord server for 1 week. Try it out. Let us know what you think about it. And if you want help finding players to build around, check out that roster review option in the pinned comment or the YouTube description box below. But with all that said, Nate, all the promo in the book. So let's get to the content that people came for. You got pick one here, going through 20 players. What do you got with your first pick?
Not much of a thought here. CJ Stroud is the #1 player under 25 available to our dynasty rosters. You're talking about a quarterback who is still only 22 years old, and it already looks like, a top 6 locked in dynasty quarterback, maybe a floor of like top 8, top 10 if that offense starts to fall apart at any time. But it looks like it's up and running and it's going to be hot this year. They added Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs. They got 2 young, great wide receivers, Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I mean, you can't get a much better situation than this. We're talking about Caleb Williams and the situation with the Bears. The Houston Texans offense is really good right now. It looks to be good for a long time now. So wheels up for CJ Stroud all around. Now, the problem, Bob, with CJ Stroud is he is basically unacquirable. I don't even know what you're going to have to pay to actually get a deal done, but value-wise for me, what I would feel comfortable with is a guy like Anthony Richardson and a 25 first and maybe a second on top of that at most. And you can sell that to me because while Anthony Richardson, his value is not too much lower than CJ Stroud, I think he's a bit more risky of a player than CJ Stroud, who we have now seen perform really, really well in the NFL after just 1 year. We saw AR in the very small sample size that he had perform well, but that's such a small sample size that college career was a small sample size as well. So there's just some more risk there. So I could see, trying to make a lateral move to a safer quarterback there, but otherwise it's just not worth it for me to move on from a guy, even like Justin Herbert, or moving on from any of the big ones like Mahomes or Josh Allen, Lamar, just to get younger. It doesn't make any sense at that point. So, not someone I'm necessarily going to acquire right now. His cost is just too high, but you could sell me on moving Anthony Richardson to get a little bit safer.
Yeah, 100%. I honestly think that there are a lot of people, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit later, who knows, that are maybe a little too rose-colored lenses with Anthony Richardson and just assuming that he's going to make this leap to being a top quarterback. In my opinion, the floor is as low as the ceiling is high. And, at the end of the day, that's something worth being concerned about and worth pivoting off of, in my opinion, to get, like you said, to a safer quarterback option. And that's what I did with my second pick here. I went with Caleb Williams, getting the first overall pick from this year's draft. I think this is pretty cut and dry. Another quarterback going into a great situation. We talked about it with, out of quarterback selected 101 the last few years, probably going into one of the better situations to start off his career. A great receiving core, good enough running back behind him, a tight end as well. Maybe that team is turning around that little bit. Who knows? But to get him, again, not super cheap. You're pivoting up from a quarterback in his draft class. You're moving on from somebody like Jaden Daniels, who was maybe drafted at the 103, 105 range. Maybe you haven't had your drafts yet. Maybe you have. Maybe you drafted Jaden Daniels, but hey, you would rather pivot to, again, somebody who we believe to be a slightly safer option in Caleb Williams. It's probably going to cost you that first round pick on top. Maybe you can argue about a second round pick back, either in that 2025 class or even possibly 2026. Either way, if you can, that'd be awesome. I'd feel that much better about the deal and kind of retaining my assets. But if that's the quarterback I ended up with and I was able to upgrade to Caleb Williams, again, that same kind of, while we haven't seen it in the NFL yet, I have a lot less questions professionally about Caleb Williams than I do about Jaden Daniels. So that's a move I'd be looking to make to move up. Nate, you got a pretty easy pick here. I think the first four-ish picks for us are usually pretty chalk. Go ahead and talk about your pick.
Yeah, the next pick is easy as well. Justin Jefferson, who's still eligible for this draft because he's still 24 years old, going to be hitting 25 here soon, but he's on this for probably one more video at least. Justin Jefferson, he is the top dog. He's the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty rankings. He's a wide receiver 1 here as well. Like you said, very easy. Another guy that's very hard to trade for, but maybe is a bit more accessible now because of rookie quarterback. There's some non-continuity at the quarterback position there in Minnesota. So Justin Jefferson may be falling down some ranks behind Jamar Chase or CeeDee Lamb. And in that case, maybe I can move a Drake London and the 103 for Justin Jefferson, because then you're not giving away one of those top 2 picks. I don't want to do that.
Sure.
But I'll give you the next pick into that tier. I don't mind moving, it sucks I'm not going to get a player in that tier, but if I can move that in a good young wide receiver like London or someone similar value, I think that locks you into a top guy like Justin Jefferson. It'd be worth it.
Yeah, I think this is for sure a deal that gets done. Whether you pivot to quarterback at that position or would have gone quarterback or wide receiver, it's kind of one of those things, the games you have to play too of, how does this play for your team? This is a 10-team format that we're kind of looking at. We do have kind of a wonky lineup set up because I wanted to kind of focus less on, previously we've done the standard 1 quarterback plus a super flex, 2 running backs, 3 wideouts, tight end, 2 flex spots. This one we've done a little different to kind of take focus away from running backs because we're talking about players we really want to build around and focusing on that concept. So we only have 1 running back slot, so the 3 wideouts, tight end, 3 flexes, super flex, quarterback. So it's a little different, but in normal leagues, it'd be tough for me to pivot off of that without getting anything in return again. But it's tough to ask for when you're getting Justin Jefferson. It's tough to ask for something back.
Tough to ask for more.
You're already getting such a bargain with a great player. And talking bargains with great players, another guy I think you get out of value because of some injuries, some dips last year. Jamar Chase coming off a pretty down year. And, ultimately, I'm not super concerned. We had some injuries pop up. Joe Burrow, again, missing some time. There's some question marks about him coming back. But at the end of the day, big fan of Jamar Chase, again, locked in as a top 4 receiving option in Dynasty overall. And, I say buy low. Sometimes buy low just means more accessible. And maybe that Jamar Chase manager who was looking to go all in last year bought up Jamar Chase, was like, hey, I got the wide receiver 1 because I think he's the one over Justin Jefferson. But things didn't pan out, but he still has a good wide receiver room. But now his running back room has kind of gone to trash, let's just say. And he wants Christian McCaffrey in a 25-second. I think that's a deal I'm looking to make for sure, especially if I'm if you're looking for an exit strategy on Christian McCaffrey, which, if you've won your leagues with him over the last couple of years, won it last year, whatever the case is, or win it in the future because of him, this is an awesome pivot point because you get to basically transfer his production or darn near close to it to a great young wide receiver that can kind of carry on that production for you before Christian McCaffrey's value eventually falls off a cliff, because it's sad to say, but it's going to happen. That he is eventually just not going to be the same player. I'm all about making the move, all about trying to gear down and get off Christian McCaffrey to get to Jamar Chase. Adding that little bit on top, I think, too, helps you pad some value, pad some youth to the team that you're getting Jamar Chase from, so they can, look ahead and be like, well, I can still get some youth on my roster to eventually not replace McCaffrey, but bring in some youth and not just buy into an older, aging player. We got an interesting pick here. You went against the curve, I guess we could say, with your pick 5.
Guess so.
We should talk about it.
There's more wide receiver depth than there is running back depth.
Sure.
So I decided I want the top guy at the running back position. I got Bijan Robinson with my next pick, the 5th pick here in this draft. And Bijan Robinson, we have a new offense down there. He was incredible his first year. Maybe he didn't get all the opportunities that he deserved, but he should see more of that this year. I expect his workload to go up, his efficiency to continue, his ability on both the ground and through the air, give him the potential to be the RB1, give him that CMC type of upside. And, we have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's another really good running back that we love, but he's got some competition in his backfield with David Montgomery. He's going to be taking up touches. And while Gibbs is efficient, Bijan, I don't think in this new offense without Arthur Smith, I don't think we're going to see as much Tyler Algier. So Bijan's going to be the guy back there. I expect this offense to improve, just be on the field more. And with that, I think Bijan, certainly is a top 3 season running back finish-wise, if not the RB1, as long as he's healthy. Bijan Robinson, the RB1 for me. To go acquire him, I'd like to try to move a guy like AJ Brown, someone who's not quite in that top tier of wide receivers, but that next tier. AJ Brown's a little bit older than most of the guys that we put in that tier. So can I move AJ Brown and a second round pick for Bijan? It's going to depend on team need. You might have to, move a first with AJ Brown, maybe ask for a second back to actually get that deal done, because it's hard to trade for a running back when we all know how valuable they are. So that's a trade I would kind of throw out there to make a move like this.
Going Bijan, even though, like I said, against the grain a little bit in this concept, but I'm with you. It's limited the amount of running backs I really feel comfortable building around. Bijan certainly cracks that list, and there's a couple more, and that's why I didn't go running back. I kind of had a timer ticking. Once you picked another running back, that's when I'd make my move and pounce. But in the meantime, I'm going to attack the wide receivers that are just chilling out here that we all love to build rosters around here. And I have bone to pick with your next one, but we'll get to that in a minute. In the interim, I'm taking Amon-Ra St. Brown off the board at pick 6. What else do you have to say about this guy? Just finally got paid, was a top paid wide receiver for all of a day and a half until A.J. Brown got paid. What more can you ask from the guy? He's produced with Jared Goff. He's been incredibly solid. He's been an incredibly consistent producer, which is something I value so much in lineups, is players that are consistent and I can rely on X production each week, especially that I can slot into a wide receiver 1 role or wide receiver 2 role. And then, with these guys that are more common boom or bust, those are guys I chuck in the flex that I'm not as reliant on. Just how I like to build my rosters in terms of looking for starters and things of that sort. So not cheap, going to be costly. Somebody who's, let's say I just got another quarterback in this draft where we have a ton of quarterbacks coming out this year. I was able to, I've built my team smart. I've been good about it. I was able to draft a bonus one in the late-ish first round. I got an extra Joe Burrow kicking around, and I'd like to go get a top wide receiver. I think I'm moving Joe Burrow for Amon-Ra St. Brown at this point. Somebody who's falling down boards that little bit.
Yeah.
I honestly think with this type of deal too, this is one I pulled from Fantasy Cal, completed trades. Since I'm moving a quarterback, I don't think it's outlandish to ask for that little bit more on top of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I probably have to send something with Joe Burrow too to help ease that along. I'm not thinking it's anything crazy. I'm thinking maybe I'm getting a 3rd round pick for a 4th or something along those lines. But, something on top, or, maybe a flex player of some consequence. Who knows? Something along those lines. People need help with their quarterbacks, and Joe Burrow just ticking me off. And I meant to say too before, and I forgot about this with Justin Jefferson, a great way you can talk your league mates down about him. Well, his quarterback was recorded throwing a bad pass during practice the other day. So during mini camps, that's just no good. Not allowed. Could have been the first pass of the day. Who knows? Not even loose, but whatever. Just want to throw that little dig out there. It drives me nuts when people just pull like, oh, here's one clip. Not even like a full set or anything, but like that. But either way, get to your pick, which, man, this surprised me. And I want to know, is it because we had this discussion a little bit the pre-draft process. Is this the landing spot that did this for you? Is this the just situations in general? What made you make this pick over the following pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can honestly go either way, but in this scenario, I'm taking it more as a startup, and I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr. here over another wide receiver. But this Marvin Harrison Jr. is 2 years younger, and we're in a startup scenario. I'm not, if I'm a competitive team, maybe I'm going a different direction in this same scenario. But in this one, I take Marvin Harrison Jr. He's in one of the best landing spots that was possible for him. He's linked to a top quarterback for a long time. He's going to be a target hog there. I think his targets could surpass the other wide receiver that you're going to talk about. While he put up his own great numbers, it's not really an argument. It's just kind of a pick your flavor. And I think in this instance, my strategy was just to go younger, have that more, is that longevity really going to matter at the end of the day? But I do think that the target share that Marvin Harrison will see with the Arizona Cardinals and getting it from a really good quarterback is going to be really valuable and create day one production where, it is kind of just splitting hairs at this point. It's tough to get that 102 right now because everyone knows that there's a teardrop after that. So I would try like the 105 and the 107. If this has to be the 103 and the 107, at the end of the day, I'm getting similar talent at the 103 as I am the 105. So I'm okay making that move. It's going to take 2 first-round picks in that top 8 though to move up to 102. Just going to depend on what exact values you need based on what you have and what the other team can stomach.
I don't disagree with this thought process too much at all, especially when we're talking about just players to build around in general. Like you said, the concept of, the youth playing on the side of Marvin Harrison being that much a little bit younger gives you that much more time to kind of build up a roster around them. We're talking about players to build around. Touche, fair enough, good sir. I'll give you that one. But I'm still taking Puka Nacua off the board here at my pick 8.
Good pick.
And it's just one of those. We always have this discussion when we get into rookie drafts and what we trade these first round picks for. The Family Guy reference of what's in the mystery box? Could it be a boat, or do you just want the boat? And this is a case of I'll just take the boat here with Puka Nacua, a known commodity, albeit that little bit older. But I'm very confident in his production going forward in the McVay offense with Matthew Stafford for as long as he's there. And I think, there's probably a little bit more gas in the tank than people like to give credit for. It might not be 5 years, like an Aaron Rodgers or, playing as long as a Tom Brady or anything like that. But I think we got some time left in that tank. And I think Puka Nacua is going to reap the rewards of that for as long as he can. So I'm taking him here. Cost wise, I think it feels like to me that some people just do not properly value Puka Nacua. And they look at this last year that he had where he set records for being essentially the best rookie wide receiver to ever play. And statistically, at least, you want to get into metrics and stuff, argumentative, whatever. Want to write it off as a fluke because, Cooper Kupp wasn't there. It's a Sean McVay offense. He's going to retire soon for whatever reason. He's going to quit football. And Matthew Stafford's old and, beaten up. So he's definitely going to retire, and all these reasons to not buy in. And people just not selling at appropriate costs. I think you can go to this manager and although I think that Jalen Waddle is a little depressed in value as well, I think you can add something on top of Jalen Waddle to go get Puka Nacua, maybe try to help out one of their other rooms. Maybe they're struggling at running back as a competitive team. They want to add somebody who can perform as a running back 2 level of production, maybe not a running back 2 in an offense or a starting lineup, I should say, but maybe like a Joe Mixon on top, Zamir White, Jalen Warren, something along those lines. Reap the rewards while there's still doubt in people's minds about Puka Nacua, because the second he comes out this year and does it again, it's over. I mean, Puka Nacua should be arguably in the same exact tier as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. If you ask me, if Puka Nacua was a day 1 or 2 pick, I don't think there's a discussion. But I think this,
you're right.
And having some limbo around him too, with McVay and all the rumors of him leaving and Matthew Stafford retiring possibly, probably play a role too. But if he was a day 1 or day 2 pick, there's zero chance that he's not in the same discussion as is. Reap the rewards of that as much as you can. That is my pick at pick 8, reaping the rewards of Puka Nacua. And you tripped the trap here. You went with a running back again.
I did.
Which, spoiler alert, I had to go with one too. But get into yours first. We'll get into mine after. What do you got?
All right, my next pickup here, I went running back again. I think there is a clear top 2 at the running back position, and it's Bijan and it's Breece Hall. Breece Hall is actually the youngest running back that's here at the top. He's actually younger than Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, still 22 years old. Also, Breece Hall last year on a terrible offense. He didn't even reach 1,000 yards rushing, unfortunately. But 40% of his yards came on breakaway runs, though. He's able to create yards himself. He had 46 missed tackles forced, which was top 10 for his position. On an offense that was so bad, he was still such a great fantasy producer that you can only assume that once Aaron Rodgers comes into the picture and is healthy and this offense improves at all, that Breece Hall's upside is immense for fantasy football. I'm talking about Bijan Robinson earlier, has that CMC kind of upside, that RB1 overall upside. Well, Breece Hall also does, because after CMC with 86 receptions last year, Breece Hall was second among running backs with 76 receptions. He is someone who can absolutely do it on the ground. He's absolutely someone that can do it through the air as well. He gives you that dual ability, and I don't see any reason why he can't continue to improve, especially from not just an efficiency metrics, but also raw numbers should go up. We can see him, another player that should have that top 3 kind of floor as long as he's healthy at the running back position, has that ability to be an RB1. So Brees Hall, someone I'm trying to acquire everywhere. He's hard to acquire though because everyone knows he's a top running back. So you're probably going to have to move at least the 103. This is once again, I'm moving off that top two, the teardrop. I can't get a running back that is of equal talent in this draft at all. So can I move the 103? Someone who might need a wide receiver or a quarterback, and maybe they're in a different situation where maybe Brees Hall's fantasy points aren't as valuable to them. That's who I'm
Mhm.
trying to go acquire Brees Hall from. Can I move the 103, the 104, something like that? I'll add on to it a little bit if I need a running back from a competitive team. There's not many players out there that are going to help my team score points and then also just be such a great dynasty asset moving forward as Brees Hall.
I think more and more, these running backs that are younger, already high end producers are really going to need to be focused on as, a crown jewel asset, let's call them, where,
Yeah.
if you at least have one of them that you can build around, and that's why I wanted to make sure I nabbed at least one of them to build around in this situation that I could feel good about. I can, every year there's aging vets at running back. This year it's James Conner, Aaron Jones, argumentatively, a handful of guys that are just undervalued that you can buy for like second or third round picks.
DeAndre Swift, one of my favorite buys.
DeAndre Swift, we just trade in the Discord, go down for him, buying him with a 204 in a 10-team league. So
Ridiculous.
you're pick 12 essentially. So I'm sorry, pick 14, not pick 16 as if it were a 12-team league. Forgive me. But the values you can get some of these running backs that you can kind of just build around, again, the concept of building around in a lineup where you can just kind of plug and play the rest of your running back room, not have to worry about investing so much high end draft capital or players into having four really good running backs. Like I don't think you need to have four Bijans. You don't need to have Bijan. You don't need you don't need Bijan. You don't need Jahmyr Gibbs. You don't need Brees Hall, and you don't need Jonathan Taylor all on the same roster. As much as fun as that is to have just a fun running back room like that, there's so much value tied up into those running backs that are, at the end of the day, just a little bit shorter term of assets that you could diversify that into other wide receiver positions, tight ends, flexes, draft picks, whatever the case is. I think going forward, a big strategy for me is going to be this like anchor running back, hero running
Hero
back,
running back, yeah.
whatever you want to call it. I think I'm going to be a big proponent of that. And any leagues that are not in that format, I'm going to find ways to improve other assets with the running backs I do have and just kind of play money ball with the rest of the running back position outside of that one piece and just have a really darn good roster that lasts long. And then with all those extra assets that I would normally spend building whatever with the running back room or elsewhere that I need to, just invest in discount dollar store running backs that can last me the year and worry about next year's running backs next year and just roll with the
Yeah.
one really good one I have.
Yeah, and Bob, I obviously feel similar because I actually traded up with you in our most recent
You did.
startup for Brees Hall. I traded up in the startup to go acquire Brees Hall, make sure I have one of these
Mm-hmm.
top guys on my team. And, I don't really need to worry about running back at this point because I can just fit other players into that RB2 slot throughout the year. And if I have good wide receivers and quarterbacks to build around to go with Brees Hall, I think my team will be just fine.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with the method. I mentioned him a little bit. Just went Jahmyr Gibbs here at pick 10. You touched on the question marks with having Dave Montgomery there. Dave Montgomery aging a little bit has been good in this offense so far. But over time, I expect Jahmyr Gibbs to get more and more of a role. While I don't expect Dave Montgomery to just be completely phased out, I think he's still going to get his work and get his carries, especially around the goal line. But Jahmyr Gibbs being a pass catching asset as well, probably going to factor into the top three in targets in this offense. Not anything to be scoffed on. And I think if you want to get a little bit younger at the running back position, you want to get into a player who has a little bit more security in their contract long term. Travis Etienne just got locked into his 5th-year option, but you can add a second-round pick on top of him, go get some youth in Jahmyr Gibbs, a similar player almost in terms of that they both have some pass-catching prowess. And while I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is necessarily going to see the volume that Travis Etienne does, we haven't seen a ton of like great efficiency out of Travis Etienne, and some of that could be that he's being kind of run ragged, whereas Jahmyr Gibbs is being kept more fresh. Who knows if that changes with Tank Bigsby this year or not, or anybody that maybe that Keelan Robinson that they added. Who knows? Maybe he gets some run, or you never know, man. I'm not ruling anything out, and I certainly won't rule in anything I don't need to. But I'm taking Jahmyr Gibbs here at my pick 10. You started some stuff here with pick 11 that just
I started playing some games.
you're a punk is what you are. What do you got here at pick 11?
Yeah, pick 11, I went ahead and grabbed Sam Laporta. Look, rookie year, you average over 14 points per game as a tight end. I mean, I know we saw a really, really good rookie season out of Kyle Pitts in 2021. He went for over 1,000 yards. In that season, he only averaged 10.4 fantasy points per game. Sam Laporta on that offense was catching touchdowns. He is a top 2 target on that offense. Maybe depending on how much they actually use Jahmyr Gibbs as a pass catcher, maybe he's 2A, 2B with Gibbs after Amon-Ra St. Brown. But at the end of the day, his youth, his quick ability, the trust that offense already puts in him to be, we always talk about, Bob, we want that 1 or 2 target on an offense. And that offense has been really efficient. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So Sam Laporta, while I'm definitely a big homer for Mark Andrews and also TJ Hawkinson when healthy, Travis Kelce until he retires, those guys are obviously going to be up there scoring among the best of them still. Sam Laporta has no reason not to be up there as well. And with his youth, I have to take him before some of these other wide receivers, some of these other players. I will say we are both kind of avoiding quarterback at this point because we have options. You would value-wise, quarterbacks would have gone off the board by now. Any kind of startup draft. But we're both waiting on quarterback because we only have to pick one more, and there's like 4 or 5 available. But with tight end, there's only so many tight ends available. Luckily, we have a couple that are really, really good under 25. But I wanted to make sure I got Sam Laporta, who is the best of them right now.
Yeah, I definitely think there will be some tweaking with the lineup as we do more of these because I really want to focus on and tinker with the concept of like really focusing on players we want to build around, maybe taking out the flexes, maybe only having the 1 running back, maybe having, whatever the case is, maybe 3 quarterback slots, something like that. Something just
Laporta
crazy.
Laporta is a great player to build around because you don't have to worry about your tight end position. Also, you're getting a player that is highly productive right away. Now, Sam Laporta, to move someone for him, you probably have to move a quarterback, I think, if you want to kind of go cross-positional. So I want to try to move Brock Purdy, and I can add a second to it. Can I do that and get Sam Laporta? Because I need to kind of leverage the quarterback position. And now tight end is kind of replaceable because there are other good tight ends, not just like 3 of them and then a whole bunch of trash. There's actually like a top tier now, a couple top tiers. Can I use the positional leverage of the quarterback position and the value that it brings to go trade for a top guy like Sam Laporta? Only have to move Brock Purdy, who some people probably have as a top 12 quarterback. I think most people probably do because of his fantasy production, because of the offense. He might be the quarterback 3 for some people. He might be the quarterback 2 for some people because they weren't invested in him as a top quarterback originally. So if you have Brock Purdy as one of 3 or 4 quarterbacks, can you use his value right now to go acquire a stud like Sam Laporta, maybe another really top tight end and top wide receiver, top running back? Not that I have anything against Brock Purdy, but on rosters where he might be an extra quarterback, can we use that value to our advantage?
I brought this up in a video with Zach that came out yesterday. Whenever you end up with excess at one position, the best thing you can possibly do, instead of just having all this depth that isn't helping out your starting lineup, find a way to turn that depth that is start worthy in other people's lineups and turn it into start worthy in your lineup or improvement in your lineups, as opposed to just leaving it kicking around doing whatever the heck it wants. Kind of gathering dust on a roster. No fun in that. That's just building excessively around something. But I love the point you bring up, something we've talked about with guys like Jordan Love too, where it's like you have to consider where this player came from on the roster. And as creators, we have to keep in mind too that not everybody has drafted Brock Purdy as a quarterback too. A lot of people up until last year were still drafting Brock Purdy as a long shot to start the season in startup drafts over the summer. And, I picked him up in one of our Rewinder leagues. I picked him up as a undrafted free agent in our rookie draft after our rookie drafts happened. And I just had him, and it's like, well, Mr. Irrelevant, I just went and added a bunch of quarterbacks, got lucky, at the end of the day. And I trade away for peanuts to what he's worth now, but it is what it is. Yeah, I wasn't expecting at that point for him to ascend to this role he's had. However, if I would have been looking at my production grades at that moment in time, I probably would have held on a little harder.
I want to say that in my first C2C league, I drafted Brock Purdy like in the 3rd round.
Aren't you special?
And I felt pretty disappointed in it for many years, but it kind of worked out. So
Looking back, I didn't do anything with him, but it worked out now.
he's a quarterback due for my NFL team now, so it worked out.
Oh, hey, okay, so it
But
did. All right,
for a
perfect.
couple years, I was like, oh man, I thought this guy was NFL talent. Then he's just doing dumb stuff. He stays in college longer. Dumb stuff on the field. He just had some
Right,
boneheaded interceptions. He's not a problem, but worked out.
fair enough. Fair enough. Well, you lulled me into a false sense of security with this pick. So I went and drafted one of my favorite players in Chris Olave, notably over some other, wide receivers that are
Yes.
fun. And I'm just like, well, Nate's going to draft some wideouts and everything will be fine for me and everything will be great. But I went Chris Olave here. I'm excited to see what he can do in this Kubiak offense. And I think there's going to be a lot more gimme plays for him as opposed to, making all this, hard work for him. Give the guy some slants, give him some easy out routes that are just quick that he can, get the ball in his hands, do something with it. He's not extremely known for being somebody who can, do much with the ball in his hands after the catch. But honestly, he hasn't had a ton of opportunity to just get these easy plays where he just gets the ball quick on these quick hitters. Olave's going to get open quick. He's a great route runner, super fast. Certainly not cheap, but an option that I saw that I kind of liked as much as talking with Noah in a video last week, talking about how DK Metcalf is kind of undervalued right now. A trade I liked to kind of maybe rework your roster a little bit again, finding players to build around versus aging assets or possibly declining assets. And by declining, I'm not saying they're going to decline this year, but players that are on the back 40 of their careers. DK Metcalf, Josh Jacobs, two players who I think are kind of trending in that direction. I get a younger asset who I think I'm still, while he's valued as a top 10-ish dynasty wide receiver, still feels like a value with what the breakout I think we have coming for us will be. Because I think he's very possibly in that top category. He doesn't have a lot of target competition there anymore. Not that Michael Thomas was ever consistent target competition, but still does not have much there in terms of tight end, in terms of other wide receivers. His most receiving competition is probably going to come from Alvin Kamara at this point. And I'm sure somebody will rise to the occasion there, maybe.
Shaheed.
That's my best bet because it sure as heck ain't Bub Means. But sorry, Mike, for that little shot there,
A.T.
but
Perry,
it is
maybe.
what it is. Maybe. Oddly enough, very good production grade.
Yeah.
Poor strength of schedule is what killed him in my gradings. But hey, if you want access to those, check out the Discord. As I mentioned at the top of the show, details how to do that in the pinned comment and the YouTube description. But going Chris Olave, trying to move DK Metcalf and Josh Jacobs for him, I honestly think as much as like it doesn't feel like you should be able to get something back again because Chris Olave is such a good get, asking for a third back in this case where you're just sending two start-worthy assets in a lineup, people might – you and I both know one of the things we've realized with drafts this season is nobody is crediting Marshawn Lloyd at this point. So many people are looking at Josh Jacobs' contract and considering it a 4-year deal still. It's not. It's a 1-year deal that he's locked into, and then it's basically a bunch of team options. And while the Packers have been, as I can attest to, very begrudgingly keeping Aaron Jones around, even though he's been very good. But, it's been kind of one of those things like, well, like, let's give A.J. Dillon an actual shot. And I'm glad we never did that, in all honesty. But, we kept stringing Aaron Jones along. We finally cut him loose. We bring in Josh Jacobs, and they could keep him. They could keep him and Marshawn Lloyd. But Josh Jacobs is going to be pretty expensive to keep for that duration of the contract if they choose to do so. And if Marshawn Lloyd shows out, this is a great get off of the pick. I think Josh Jacobs is being more valued in. I think Josh Jacobs can have a great year. I think this is a good offense for him to be in.
Yeah.
But I think Marshawn Lloyd's the future. I think this is a great jettison point to get to Chris Olave possibly, especially if somebody values DK Metcalf. And hey, DK Metcalf, nothing to scoff at the end of the day. People might balk at that a little bit, but honestly, like DK Metcalf should be higher value than he is. But you went and just threw a wrench in everything I had going with this next one. I was miffed. I'm like, he did not just do that, but you did.
I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear that, Bob. Whenever we do these, I get really into how I can beat you. How I can. I'm drafting against you. I'm not just picking the
Which
best
shouldn't
team.
be how
I'm
it
picking
is.
the better team. Okay, so I know how you work. I saw you wait on running back, and I picked up Brees Hall. I know I picked up Sam Laporte, and you're over there thinking, oh, great, now I'm the one who gets to wait on tight end. Nate was the first one to pick a tight end, so now I get to pick the guy I want later. save myself some picks and get some wide receivers in the meantime. Well, Bob, I decided I wanted to pick up Dalton Kincaid, add to my flex spot. You said only one running back, one tight end. I got two of each. So I got Dalton Kincaid with my 13th pick here. And I just talked about how Sam Laporta averaged over 14 fantasy points per game last year. Okay, if we look at Sam Laporta's stats last year, 86 receptions. Dalton Kincaid had 81. Sam Laporta had 889 yards. Dalton Kincaid only had 777. So about 110-yard difference there. But the big difference in where the fantasy points came from is Sam Laporta had 10 touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid had 3. That Detroit Lions offense looks the same. Expect Sam Laporta to have similar numbers this year. But the Buffalo Bills moved on from Stephon Diggs this offseason. Everything they have said has said that they don't need a wide receiver one. They like Keon Coleman and they invested draft capital into him, but they've said they do not need a wide receiver one. This is Joe Brady, who is the offensive coordinator, who spread the ball around in Carolina, and Curtis Samuel had one of his best seasons that we've seen. And now Curtis Samuel's there, Khalil Shakir is there, Keon Coleman, the rookie, is there, who is a little raw. Dalton Kincaid looks to be the number one target in this offense. This team has looked at how Kansas City and Mahomes and Andy Reid have used Travis Kelce as the number one target on that offense and have been able to build around it with wide receivers that maybe aren't worthy of being a wide receiver one on their teams. And the Buffalo Bills are now doing that with Dalton Kincaid, who saw over 100 targets last year, is very, very talented, was our favorite tight end coming out last year, our tight end one. And I think what he's set up for, especially in PPR leagues, because I expect him to probably get 100 receptions this year. I expect him to be up to that 14 fantasy points per game and join that elite tier of tight ends this coming year with how he's going to be using this offense. And I took him over some wide receivers because of that, because 14 points per game is nothing to scoff at. Wide receivers who average over 14 points per game, there's about 15 of them, 17 of them maybe. So once you get outside of those top wide receivers, they're all averaging under 14 points per game. So to have a tight end that can do that, it provides an elite level, and I can put him in my flex. I can probably replace my wide receiver position pretty easily, my wide receiver 3. So the cost to get Dalton Kincaid right now, I think is really cheap as well for his production that we're going to get, as well as the fact that he's a young tight end as well. So right now, you can move Tank Dell straight up for Dalton Kincaid. It's going to be a little bit harder maybe in some tight end premium leagues, but Dalton Kincaid right now, not the top tight end. Brock Bowers is over him for some people. A lot of people are still more interested in him. So I think Dalton Kincaid, not being looked at as even a top 3 tight end for some people, I think he deserves that when you take into account the youth and the production he's set up for now.
I think even when you get into the discussion of points per game that other wide receivers are doing, you get into the conversation of other production that tight ends are doing. And what we expect Dalton Kincaid to do this year is just going to blow other tight ends out of the water. Yeah. And being a younger tight end, albeit an older tight end as a prospect, I think he'll be 20, almost.
He's 24.
He won't be able to be on this list next year because he's already quote unquote old. But tight ends play forever. We know that. He's going to be able to be on your roster for another 6 years. Tied to Josh Allen. Josh Allen is going nowhere either. Guy who loves to chuck the ball around. We know that. Even though we kind of do have the sense that this might be more of a, not more run heavy, but turn into a little bit more run reliancy than it has been in the past years, where Josh Allen's chucking the ball 550 times a year. That number might come down, but at the end of the day, like you said, Dalton Kincaid is primed and ready to be the top receiving option in this offense. I touched on this a ton. He was my must-buy trade target when in our video with Noah and Noah's debut. Go check that out if you haven't yet. But yeah, I was miffed on this one because I was really hoping that I wasn't even going to wait that much longer. Like I was probably going to make this pick and be like, well, I don't want to wait too long because I know Nate's a punk when it comes to this stuff, but you did it. You did me dirty, but that is A-okay. I went and just said, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and soak up this wide receiver value that you're letting fall. While you're getting this great tight end to put in your slot or flex slot, that's fine with me, but I am going to go ahead and I'm going to take Garrett Wilson off the board here as another great option to build around, in my opinion. I think finally with this quarterback fix of Aaron Rodgers being healthy, hopefully he stays that way. And if Aaron Rodgers can be 70% of what he's been the last several years, he's a dramatic improvement over what Garrett Wilson has had to work with already in his career. Garrett Wilson is a target monster. Out of every metric that between him and Chris Olave, there's a lot of just natural comparison there between them both being out of Ohio State, drafted in the same year, drafted basically back to back, I believe, in the draft they were in, if not back to back. Exactly, whatever the case is, they were drafted very closely. You get it. There's just a natural comparison there. Chris Olave just about beats out Garrett Wilson in everything except for the targets. Garrett Wilson just gets peppered with targets. And if he's peppered with targets from Aaron Rodgers, it's wheels up. So I'm happy building around him here. And as much as I hate to do it, with Jackson Smith and Jigba right now, what's his path to, great supreme relevancy? As much as I love the guy, and I think he's undervalued and a decent enough buy if you want somebody who can be a wide receiver 3-2 fringe for you this year, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the shot on the sure thing, send a 25 first, especially if I'm looking to be more competitive this year. Sending that 25 first with JSN to go get Garrett Wilson. If I, like I said, competitive, expecting that 25 first to be late, even if JSN pops off to be a top wide receiver 2, mid wide receiver 2, with what I think I'll get out of Garrett Wilson, 140 plus targets, I think I'm going to be pretty happy with whatever the outcome is, especially for my competitive team versus having a mid wide receiver 2 who might be a little younger, but at the end of the day, points in lineup is what wins a championship. And I think Garrett Wilson gets me there a heck of a lot faster than a JSN would, as much as I love JSN.
I know I saw that on there. That's a tough one for you, Bob. But
it is. It's tough. Sometimes you got to pivot. You got to move off of players you like to get to better players that are going to score more points in your lineup sooner rather than later. And you went and did a pick here.
Yep. Picked a wide receiver up. My favorite rookie wide receiver is Rome Odunze, so I was happy to pick him up here. I know that maybe he doesn't have the initial target share that Malik Neighbors has, but I believe in Rome Odunze as a very safe prospect.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that he's set up long-term, especially with Caleb Williams. They've already shown great chemistry off the field, and from the sound of first day of rookie minicamp, they've already shown great chemistry already on the field. I expect that to continue. I know he's got some competition in that wide receiver room, but I believe that a year or two from now, we're going to be looking at Rome Odunze as a top 12 wide receiver. I'm happy to pick him up here. I think the talent is there. The connection is there. Everything is set up well for him, just like it's set up well for Caleb Williams. Cost right now for Rome Odunze, still expensive. I think you have to move a guy like Brandon Ayuk to go get Rome Odunze. And that's going to hurt. You have to kind of be looking to not value points as much out of that position. Maybe you have a bevy of wide receiver talent, and Ayuk is like your wide receiver 3, and you just want to get younger because you already have some other guys that can carry your lineup. Or maybe you're starting a rebuild. Maybe you're looking to push back a year, and then you can, move Ayuk, which is still going to hurt because he's only 26 years old. Maybe you try to move a guy like Devonta Smith, who is also similar value, but maybe doesn't have the upside of Ayuk because now he's long-term signed there with AJ Brown as well. If Ayuk finds a different team or Debo moves on, his upside could be higher. So I'd also maybe try a guy like Devonta Smith to move over and try to get Rome Odunze, who I just believe in so much, and I love how he's set up for success.
I do think, admittedly, we could be looking at a similar situation with Rome Odunze. As much as I do think he's better than JSN, I think because of the wide receiver talent that's ahead of him, and if this Bears offense struggles at all, we saw Shane Waldron is the offensive coordinator there who had 3 great wide receivers to deal with in Seattle last year, albeit much better quarterback than Caleb Williams and Geno Smith. I think we can all agree on that. But you have to wonder, that offense was super bland with Shane Waldron at the end of the day. Did not use 3 wide receiver sets properly. That's the belief. That's general consensus across the league, is that's the feeling of how that situation was. I believe in Rome Odunze long term, but I don't know if we're getting to that point of his value until maybe next year after we see him maybe without Keenan Allen is kind of the timeline I kind of see for him. But hey, maybe he pops off enough this year more than JSN did because of Caleb Williams. Maybe Shane Waldron has his act together more than I think he does. Who knows, whatever the case may be. But either way, like the call here, like the shout. And I was trying to bait you with this one, with this next pick I made, because I went with Malik Neighbors and I left a very notable wide receiver on the board here that, spoiler alert, you did not go after, which is Drake London. But so I went Malik Neighbors here. Full disclosure, Drake London doesn't get picked up in here. He would have, if Nate would have stopped drafting tight ends. I would have picked him up. No, this is not my fault. This is your fault because I had him in my queue. You kept drafting tight ends. Not my fault. You were supposed to pick up some wide receivers at some point, and I'd be like, all right, I'll take Drake London now at a great value. I'm happy with it. But here we are. So Drake London doesn't get drafted, and everybody gets to get mad at us in the comments again. Thank you, Nate. I appreciate it. But
Welcome.
I'm very interested in drafting Malik Neighbors here because, as I've touched on with a video with Zach recently, I have not been able to draft Malik Neighbors anywhere, not even in our stinking mock drafts that happen every single night in the Discord as well. A great perk of being in the Discord. Getting to mock with us every single day. Chat up in there a little bit more in depth, etc. You get it. But Malik Neighbors, love that he's going to be the vacuum target there in New York. Not a lot else going on in the New York wide receiver room. He's going to be the clear number one target. Not a lot in the tight end room that we're worried about in terms of being a target hog of any kind, as much as we like Danny Belly over there and Theo Johnson. But hey, you brought up the nickname.
I like it.
I'm gonna run with it. So that's how I roll. But I have to ask you, Nate, if you have Malik Neighbors, I have Drake London. What on top of Drake London gets me Malik Neighbors?
Early second, probably.
Oof, killing me.
Mid
That's a
second.
pretty big gap. That's a pretty big gap. Would you throw me back a third next year?
Of course I would, Bob.
Okay, I appreciate you for that. So that's the price I'd pay. I'd look to pay because apparently, and this is, I mentioned this with Zach too. This is just something I don't love that we do in Dynasty is we love to put rookies that haven't done anything yet high in rankings. Malik Neighbors right now, big problem with him. He's ranked as a top 8 wide receiver. Just about any ADP resource you look at, looking at startup drafts, very, very highly ranked already. And I do think some of that is the lack of target competition there already. But you have that shaky quarterback situation. Who knows? Malik Neighbors might not pop off early. If that offense sputters, if Daniel Jones can't put it back together, if Drew Lock's chucking the ball out there, who knows what we're working with. So I went with Malik Neighbors at pick 16, and then you just kept.
Yeah. I'm here with pick 17. And I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to pick up Drake London at this point.
Yep, that was the goal.
Drake London, who has averaged under 11 fantasy points per game the last 2 seasons. All right. I was just talking about how valuable it is for someone to average 14 points per game. Well, I decided I was going to go up to Trey McBride at this point. And I picked up Trey McBride. And let's go back. Let's go back to my argument for Dalton Kincaid, Bob. Okay. We got Sam Laporta, who we just talked about, over 14 points per game. 86 receptions. Trey McBride, 81 receptions, just like Dalton Kincaid. Sam Laporta, 889 yards. Trey McBride, 825. Actually, a bit more than Dalton Kincaid. But once again, the 10 touchdowns that Sam Laporta had, the 3 touchdowns that Trey McBride had. What kind of quarterback play was he playing with most of the season? He's getting the quarterback upgrade. If your argument for Drake London is the quarterback upgrade, Trey McBride is just as much of a quarterback upgrade. And even though Marvin Harrison was added to that offense, that's really all they've added to that offense. There was not a lot of competition for targets there. Now, I know Drake London doesn't have a lot of competition for targets either, but I actually feel more confident in Kyler Murray than I do Kirk Cousins coming off the Achilles injury in that new offense. I understand you could easily argue Drake London here, of course, but also I want to make the point that these tight ends right now that we have at the top are really valuable, and the production that they're giving. I mean, Trey McBride is capable of hitting 14 fantasy points per game this year, and I don't know. I think Drake London is definitely going to have a better year. I think he'll probably average 12 or 13 fantasy points per game this year, with upside for more, depending on how that offense throws. Trey McBride put up really, really good numbers last year, and from a yards per route run basis was over 2. Guy like Dalton Kincaid was 1.5. Trey McBride was really, really efficient, and if that offense improves, he's out there running more routes. He's also another guy that could see over 100 receptions, being that number 1, number 2 target for an offense. So I just think these tight ends who are truly solidifying themselves at that top spot for their team while being under 25, and they're just being used as such great receivers, they're really valuable and should be mentioned with these other names like Drake London, like Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, this next tier of wide receivers after like the top 10. These tight ends start to fit in there.
I think real quick before you get into the cost, I think that's the key here is you can get possibly, I think the floor of production or what we can really realistically expect from Trey McBride at a points per game standpoint is close enough to Drake London's. And the cost to get Trey McBride, if you're just putting both of these guys into your flex spot at the end of the day and you're comparing the points you end up with, Trey McBride is going to be much easier to acquire than a Drake London any day of the week. As much as I believe a little bit more in Drake London, I feel he should have been on this list. Like I said, he was in my queue. I wanted to make Nate draft him, and that vindictiveness is what got me at the end of the day. But it is what it is. So why don't you get into the cause for Trey McBride? That is very much less than what it would cost to get Drake London, which I think is something you need to consider when you're talking about putting points in your lineup, how much they cost versus what you're getting, and then comparing what you get with the cost you're paying and the points you're getting. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think Trey McBride, while he is considered a top 3 tight end from a lot of people right now, is accessible because you could move a guy like Devon Achane for him. You can move a running back, not in that top 5, but somewhere in that 6, 7, 8 range for Trey McBride, because it's just the tight end position is undervalued compared to the other positions. And I get it. It makes sense why it is, but the tight end position is coming around. We have these young studs that are able to put up really impressive points for their position, and it puts them into that conversation with the wide receivers. So, going after Trey McBride, going after Dalton Kincaid, going after Sam Laporta, I'm happy to have all 3 of these tight ends on my roster, Bob. I don't know what tight end you're taking at this point, because I got some of the best ones here.
Luckily, there's still one kicking around that now I know I can wait for, because there's no way you're going to take a tight end in your super flex slot. So I will wait on tight end that one more spot, and I will address my super flex slot because I have a preference here, sticking with some security that little bit in this pick 18 of mine. I'm going Trevor Lawrence here, and we talked about it a good bit on this channel that, as much as Trevor Lawrence has done well or good, decent with what he's had to work with, still feels like everybody's just kind of giving up on him, even though he's the last man standing from his draft class in terms of not being traded from their original team or basically being close to out of the league at this point. Trevor Lawrence still kicking around. I think he's relatively accessible. Trade I saw on Fantasy Calc trades, completed trades, Bryce Young at a 25 first. I find it hard to believe that if I sent somebody Bryce Young at a 25 first right now, I wouldn't get Trevor Lawrence back and something small on top, because of, while I do think that Bryce Young is also still a little undervalued at this point, he's headed in the right direction. He has this offensive coach coming in that has made Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith, more importantly, look like stud quarterbacks. And while Baker Mayfield's kind of been a chameleon anywhere he goes, except Cleveland for the most part, he showed well last year and, really rejuvenated his career, in my opinion, got himself a contract deal. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to send Bryce Young at 25 first to secure a quarterback who, as much as I believe in Bryce Young this year, I would like to, again, it's that conversation we had with Anthony Richardson. I would like to secure that spot up that little bit. I drafted Bryce Young in our C2C startup, and I'm looking to, he was like the absolute last quarterback I wanted for my quarterback 2. I'm still looking to upgrade that quarterback that little bit any way I can. I'm looking to get to Tua. Tua doesn't work in this conversation, unfortunately, because he is over 25. So it is what it is. That's what I'm going with here. What is your last pick, Nate? You have a superflex slot.
I do.
Did you go tight end? Did you do me dirty again?
I did not go tight end here. I let you pick the quarterback up next because I was between these two. So I took the value here in Anthony Richardson, who, Bob, I actually just acquired in our recent C2C startup. It was an unusual pick for me. It's my first Anthony Richardson share, but the upside is immense, and the quarterbacks were left on the board. He felt like the best value to me at that point. Guys like Caleb, Trevor Lawrence were already off the board. So Anthony Richardson, someone who boasts absolutely top 5 upside in Dynasty, in season production. The upside that he has immense. But like you mentioned earlier, the floor is also pretty low. Now, there's a lot going for him. The offense he's in is very good. There's a lot of talent around him. He's got a great coaching staff around him as well that is proven to develop quarterbacks, help quarterbacks grow. And despite the small sample size, a lot of positives going in his direction. So I think he's still very, very valuable. And also the upside that he provides is still worth the risk. While he's not the guy I usually go after because I usually avoid risk, the risk is worthwhile in his case because of the upside that he provides. So in this instance for cost, I thought of something I would actually pay to go get Anthony Richardson, because in most cases I won't pay up for Anthony Richardson because I'd rather have the safer quarterback. But in
Sure.
this instance, I would move a guy like Jaden Daniels, who I also have a lot of questions about. I have more questions about Jaden Daniels than I do Anthony Richardson. And I like the situation that Anthony Richardson is in a lot more. Could I move Jaden Daniels in the 25 first for Anthony Richardson? I think it could be more than that I would need to give up. But also, Jaden Daniels is the 103 in consensus
Yeah.
ADP, and it might not take too much more than that to go get Anthony Richardson if someone's maybe a little afraid after the small sample size, after the injury, things like that.
I'd be surprised if you had to chuck a first onto this deal to get it done. I definitely think that a 25 second probably gets it done.
Mm.
If you like Anthony Richardson and you have him, I can't imagine that you look at Jaden Daniels and you're like, well, I also could be a fan of that with all the similar upside and traits that both players have, and you get that pick on top. I don't think it takes too much to make that pivot.
All right.
Maybe it's like a player that's in that fringe range of like worth 2 seconds in a versus a first, something in that range or something along those lines gets it done. But don't hate the pick here that much at all. Like we've touched on though, and we've hinted at it enough, but I'll bring it up again. Players to build around. Players with question marks, not much my forte. But hey, you're moving a player with question marks to get another one. But either which way, moving along to my last pick, I finally addressed tight end. And hey, I'm happy going after Kyle Pitts here, rounding up the tight end position, the quote unquote fourth best tight end under 25. Not a bad consolation prize here. Brock Bowers is on the board, but I want somebody who's going to produce a little bit more right now. And honestly, might be a little easier to acquire than a Brock Bowers. I think, if I were to move Brock Bowers for Kyle Pitts, I think I'd be able to get a little plus on top of Kyle Pitts in most cases, even though I think Kyle Pitts is more set to produce sooner rather than later. And throwing out some fun facts, I brought this up before the show to you. In 2022, so this is, rewinding it back a little bit, his Superflex startup ADP was pick 11 overall. And now, even with what looks like to be an improved quarterback and offensive situation, his current ADP is pick 62. And it still seems like there's some value left in the bones in the grand scheme of things where I can pick him up at a pretty decent value. Looking at a bunch of trades for him, a lot of players or values in the range of a late 24 first. I do think you might need to add a little bit more on that, whether it's a 25 second or third. If you've already had your drafts, players like Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks. Maybe these are just players you kind of lucked into. Maybe you lucked into or got Brooks with the thought of, well, I don't really need a running back right now. I'll just let him come back from this ACL tear that he's coming back from and then utilize him later. But this situation came up where I could buy Kyle Pitts, still a super young tight end to work around as well, not getting old anytime soon. But that is my tight end. That is the last pick. Notable players left on the board. Number one, probably that I know people will talk about, Drake London, Jaden Daniels, who was thrown in a couple trades, Brock Purdy, who was in a trade, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Devon A. Chan, Jordan Addison, Devon A. Chan was in a trade, Zay Flowers, Jack Smith, and Jigba, who was in a trade, Ken Walker, Tank Dell, rounding out the top 31 available players under 25 per keep trade cut. That's just the easiest way to go look up players that are
31.
under a certain age.
Why
31. What's that?
Why not 32?
Because somebody double typed or double put Garrett Wilson so that now there's an oops on the screen as opposed to but it is what it is. Hey, we still didn't use all the players that were listed, and I only cut off the 32nd player, so I'll take it as a win either which way it is. But with that said, all these players to build around in the books, I hope you guys are building those rosters right. And to make sure you're building them right, check out the roster review option in the link below, pinned comment, YouTube description box. You know where to go. And hey, if you want help building your roster every single day from Nate and myself, get in that Patreon Discord, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Try it out for a week free on us. But until next time, we're going to get the heck on out of here. We'll see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.